皆さん、こんにちは。
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today on such a very hot summer's day. We're very glad to have all of you here with us, and we are very glad to start our symposium shortly. We'll just share some information about the interpreting today. For those of you here at the venue, hopefully you have received the interpreting device and you're already able to listen. This English is being provided on channel 2. And today is being organized together with simultaneous interpretation. The interpretation is provided by PISPO staff and friends today. We have also people joining us via Zoom today, and they are also able to listen to either Japanese or English online as well. So today we have the Japanese members or the members of FOE Japan will be speaking in Japanese, and those joining us from other parts of the Asia Pacific will be presenting in English. We're very glad to now begin our symposium, Climate Justice Now, Japan's Role Towards Achieving a Just and Equitable Transition in the Asia Pacific. My name is Akiko Yoshida of FOE Japan, and I will be the overall moderator for today. The purpose of today, actually the organizers, it's by both FOE Japan, FOE Asia Pacific, and also Hosei University. So we're very glad to have the 3 partners joining together to organize today's symposium. And there are many other organizations which are also giving their support to the organizing. Their organizations are listed on the screen here at the moment. Apologies, many of them are written in Japanese, but this is a wide range of different environmental and justice organizations here in Japan. First of all, to introduce FOE Japan is the Japanese branch, shall we say, or organization of Friends of the Earth, a global environmental network. We have our headquarters here in Tokyo, in Itabashi. And FOE Asia Pacific today we have members from FOE International, and within that we have the regional network from FOE Asia Pacific, the regional group, and it is the members from the Asia Pacific who have been here in Tokyo since Monday until yesterday having internal meetings for FOE Asia Pacific. There are about 20 members who have traveled to Japan for this purpose. And so with this great opportunity, we wanted to have the chance to speak about climate justice and just transition here in the Asia Pacific region, to share experiences and voices with a broader group joining this symposium today as well. So to explain a little bit about the background of today's symposium, of course, with the heat that we're experiencing here, the impact of the climate crisis is being felt all over the world now as well. According to the WMO, 2023 was the warmest year ever on record. Here in Japan, we're also having very unusual extreme weather, both this heat and also other heavy rains and so on. I'm sure many of you have realized this as well. At COP28 last year, the transition from fossil fuels was adopted on the other hand. So looking at how we can actually achieve this goal and how we can achieve a just transition is now a hot topic for people around the world. Looking at, for example, workers who have been involved in these fields, regions that are dependent on this, people who have been marginalized through this process, to make sure that they are not left out and that the breaking away from fossil fuels is done in a just way is something which is achieving or receiving great attention internationally now. So today we're glad to welcome activists from more than 10 countries throughout the Asia Pacific region who will be speaking about climate damage in their own countries, and also the challenges, for example, of false solutions being taken in the name of climate actions, as well as actual positive initiatives which are taking place, and also what Japan can do to help to realize the just transition that we are seeking. So we have people who are really on the front lines of the climate justice movement in the Asia Pacific region, and we hope you can enjoy this chance to hear from them directly. So first of all, I would like to invite some opening greetings from the other organizers. First of all, we will hear from Diana Kaur of Hosei University.
I think she said it already. The heat testifies to the reason why we're here today. I'm Diana Core. I'm a VP for International Affairs, as well as for the promotion of gender equality and diversity in the university. It is my great honor to welcome you and a privilege for our students and all in the audience to have the chance to learn about the engagement and activism of individuals in battling the climate crisis in the East, in the Asia Pacific region. I also consider it appropriate that a faculty of intercultural communication at Hosei University co-hosts this important international symposium. As a university, we have been committed to addressing environmental issues. Indeed, back in 1999, President Kiyonari adopted an environmental charter for Hosei University. And in the same year, we became the first comprehensive university in Japan to obtain certification for the international standard for environmental management. We have been keeping up our effort in environmental management across all three campuses. When we were selected as a top global university by the government of Japan in 2014, our theme was the building of a sustainable future through education and research. Last year, President Hirose released a statement on carbon neutrality, and the university made a commitment towards carbon neutrality through education, research, and actual efforts to reduce emissions of greenhouse gases. These efforts probably come to the mind of most of us here at the university when environmental issues are brought up. But as the mission of Friends of the Earth tells us, this is only half of the story. Environmental issues cannot be addressed without also addressing social justice and the inclusion of people who have been previously excluded from decision-making in a community or society. We are again on the same page. As a university, as we made our commitment towards addressing environmental issues, we also committed ourselves to the realization of the SDGs, as well as the promotion of diversity, equity, and inclusion. In 2016, President Tanaka released a statement on diversity. And in April this year, we opened the DEI Center. We still have a long way to go, but co-hosting events like today's symposium helps us towards our shared goals. I'm sure that members of our university, students, faculty, staff have much to learn from today's symposium. And for that, I'm grateful that you have chosen to gather here to share your experiences and insights. Thank you very much. ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. And we are very glad also for Professor Matsumoto, who is also on the board of FOE Japan from Hosei University, who has supported today as well. Next, we will have Hemanta from FOE in Sri Lanka, who will share some words on behalf of FOE Asia Pacific and FOE International, sorry.
Aibuan from Sri Lanka. And good afternoon, everybody. Professor Diana Ko, distinguished guest, colleagues, and all the participants here. 2 months ago, we had Roborosia flowers in Sri Lanka, and it reminded me Japan, Sakura from Japan. So that's always, we love to come to this country because of the nature, because of the people here. And we are here with very hot weather, and everybody's sweating, and still I love sweating because I come from Sri Lanka, 35, 32 degrees. But few years back, the temperature in my country was like 27. It's the average temperature. Now, sometime it goes to 40, 42 degrees. It's very warm, even for us. When we come here, I found this people, very nice people, even in the road. So when you ask people about how to go to different places, you know, so they're very friendly. So we have a developed country here, but it has a cost. So the cost comes with fossil fuel. It's a huge economy. It's a very rich economy. I know there are some issues, but it has the development comes with this great economy. So we, in the Friends of the Earth International, we are based in 74 different countries, and we have different programs working on economic justice and resistant neoliberalism, forest and biodiversity, and the climate change and energy and food sovereignty. And other than that, all our members are very actively engaging in the environmental justice movement across the world. So these organizations are trying to bring the justice, social justice, environmental justice, economic justice to the people. So here we are with Friends of the Earth Japan, and we are very thankful for Friends of the Earth Japan for hosting this meeting. And I'm sure this symposium will give you some information to enlighten you about our activities and what is happening around the world. And please enjoy the symposium and learn something, and let's work together in the future. Thank you so much, everybody.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much, Hemanta. So now I'm glad to introduce the first session of today, which is focusing on the loss and damage caused by climate change in the Asia-Pacific region. We will have reports or case studies from 3 different countries. And I'm glad to first introduce the moderator who is joining us from Malaysia today, and this will be Deva. So Deva, I will pass the microphone to you.
All right, selamat petang. Good afternoon. And it's an honor and privilege to be here amongst all of you and to be able to share some of our perspective from Friends of the Earth Asia Pacific. My name is Deva Lingam, and I'm from Malaysia, and I'm with Friends of the Earth Malaysia. And from Friends of the Earth Malaysia, we have a very good relationship with Friends of the Earth Japan, and we work together on a number of issues, especially issues concerning biomass as well as timber, on timber issues. So without further ado, I'm going to start this session, moderating this session. And this session will be setting the context for the next 2 sessions. And we will be hearing right from the communities who are really impacted by climate change. So climate change is very real, and the impacts have been severely felt in the last few years. And we have with us 3 formidable speakers coming from climate-impacted countries, as well as island states. So we will hear the perspectives of what's happening on the ground right now. And I really hope that you will enjoy this session. So how I will do it is I will introduce speaker by speaker. And then if we have a little bit of time after each speaker, maybe we can take 1 question from the audience. So that is how I'll be moderating this session. So we'll start now with the first speaker. Our first speaker is Saida Rizwana Hassan. She is the Chief Executive of the Bangladesh Environmental Law Association, Friends of the Earth Bangladesh. And she has been with BELA for short, for the organization for the last 30 years. Rizwana is a public interest lawyer who has done many cases. You can Google her and you will find her name on the many cases in Bangladesh. And she is also the 2012 Magsaysay awardee. And I'm really happy to have Rizwana. Please come forward, and we would really love to listen to you on the critical impacts or the critical issues that the communities are facing in Bangladesh right now as a result of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Friends of the Japan, for organizing this symposium and for giving me an opportunity to actually talk about the environmental and climate justice challenges that a country like Bangladesh is facing without any fault of its own. My presentation will actually heavily be focused on Bangladesh. I don't know how much you know about Bangladesh. It's a South Asian country right at the bottom of the Himalaya, and it has the Bay of Bengal on one side of the country. It is one of the most populated countries of the world. It's the 8th most populated country of the world. We hardly emit greenhouse gases. For the global community to calculate how much greenhouse gases we emit remains a challenge. But we are one of the worst victims of climate injustice. We consider climate change as a justice issue. The reason is we are disproportionately impacted by the development model of the Western countries. We had no role to play in the creation of the problem, yet we are facing the worst consequences of it. I may now start with the slides and request Hanai to start with it. You can just do away with this one. Oh, that's in. So the first slide is about why loss and damage is a justice issue. If we see the figures, we see that there will be a 24% increase in global population that will be exposed to flooding. We will be facing a 31% increase in economic loss due to hazards like flood. We will be seeing a 38%, we have seen actually, a 38% increase in loss in port operation due to recurrent disasters like cyclones. We have seen 60% loss in working hours. We have seen 80% global population, and that's an increased rate, that are at risk of crop failure. So these are serious consequences of climate change that we are all facing. The next slide is about what are some of the common challenges of climate change. We all know about increase in temperature. We all know about sea level rise. We all know about increased risk of natural disaster. And with that, when we have sea level rise, for many countries of the world, that poses an existential crisis. We have Maldives as our neighbor in South Asia. And it is feared that with sea level rise, by 2050, Maldives may disappear from the map of this world. We have got PNG that has its own challenges. So when there is more fire incident, when there are more cyclones, when we'll still be pursuing the path of deforestation, it will all lead to loss of biodiversity. It will all increase the risk of natural disaster and also man-made disasters. The next one, please. This is a map that shows how the global population will be displaced by the increased number of natural disasters. I'm not going to details into it, but it's really alarming. Why is, the next slide is about climate change in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is extra vulnerable to the challenges of climate change. With one cyclone taking place in the United States, the US economy will probably take 15 days to 1 month to absorb the shock and to put things back to places. Whereas a country like Bangladesh that has resource challenges, that has infrastructure challenges, may take 15 to 20 years to absorb the shock. Because of our geographic position, we are actually in very bad state. And it's not only in Bangladesh that's happening. It will also be happening in Nepal, which has been ranked as the worst country to be impacted by climate change. It will also be happening in Pakistan. It will be happening in Thailand. It will be happening in Philippines. It will be happening in Myanmar, all within the Asia Pacific region. And Bangladesh will be the 7th country to be worst hit by climate change. Now, this is the map of Bangladesh. Climate change is not only a natural disaster issue, it's a political sovereignty issue for many of us. Most of my country is below 5 meters from the sea level. And the southern part of my country is just 1 meter above the sea level. So with increased temperature, melting of the Himalayas, flash flood, sedimentation, and acidity, if the sea level rises by 1 meter only, 1/3 of the 8th most populated country goes under sea. That means you will have to relocate the population of this 1/3 of Bangladesh to the rest of the 2/3 of the landmass, but the rest of the 2/3 of the landmass is already overcrowded. This also means that the way I draw the map of Bangladesh, the next generation, my children, will not be drawing the map of Bangladesh in the same way. This also means that the sea water will be intruding into the freshwater system. And Bangladesh, you, the Japanese people, may be very proud of your fish, but I can challenge you on that aspect because we are the 2nd largest sweetwater fishery of the world. So the 2nd largest sweetwater fishery of the world will just disappear. This is how the salinity will be impacting food production in Bangladesh. Can I go to the next slide immediately? Yeah. This is a picture from the southern part of Bangladesh, which has the Bay of Bengal as the bordering area. So the cyclones that are originating in the Bay of Bengal will actually be directly hitting the southern coast. And the number of such cyclones and natural disasters have increased 10 times in last 50 years. This has led to huge loss and damage in the country. And this loss is beyond the adaptation capacity of the country. This is the graph that's showing how the number of natural disasters have increased in last 50 years. This is the map that shows how many major cyclones we had in last 20 years only, not to talk about last 50 years. This particular slide also shows that 10 million people in Bangladesh will be homeless, and the tropical cyclones will cause 1 billion in losses annually. So that's a huge loss that a country like Bangladesh, an economic like Bangladesh, will have to deal with. And 75% of all the disasters that the country has faced have actually been hit in this southern part. So you see the difference between how the Dutch people and the Bangladeshi people deal with tidal surges. So it's not only cyclone, it's tidal surges also. We do have embankments, but they're not very strong. And we are the largest river delta. Our formation, the formation of the country has not yet been completed. We are still being formed with sedimentation coming from the Himalayan rivers. So this is last year when a cyclone hit and the coastal embankment was damaged. You see the woman, they're trying to protect that coastal embankment with some sand boxes, and they're sitting there. And if you immediately think about how the Dutch have dealt with it, you would understand that why climate injustice is a loss and damage issue for Bangladesh, and it may not be that much of a concern in the global north. This is about how the temperature has risen in Bangladesh. and how salinity has increased, how many people have been affected in the 9 northern districts in 2022, 2023, and 2024 due to flood. And it is being estimated that 20 million people in the coastal region of Bangladesh are drinking saline water. And this is a very dangerous fact to take and digest, because women are forced to take saline water and they are getting eclampsia. This is a form of high blood pressure that you get during pregnancy. They are having eclampsia. This has become a very common issue. That is because they are forced to drink saline water all the time. This is about how our land is becoming salinated. So it was 83.3 million hectares in 1973. Then it rose up to 102 million hectare, and now it is 105 million hectare in 2009. So we are having salinity not only in our freshwater supplies, in our rivers, we are also having salinity on our land. That means that our crop production, our food sovereignty, our food security is also being impacted. Added to this, we do have our own urbanization challenges, we do have our own infrastructure challenges, and we do have our resource challenges. So this is a picture that shows that the women in the coastal area, they have water all around. You see, they are actually walking through water just to get 2 pots of potable water. So sometimes they have to walk 3 to 5 kilometers to get just 1 pot filled. And with that 1 pot, they meet the water demand of their families for 3-4 days. And in the coastal areas, women are always having skin diseases, children are always having skin diseases, and women do not, take shower for 3-4 days, because taking shower will actually be forced every day, will mean that they'll have to take shower in the salinated water. So it's a huge crisis, and they don't even get the fish supply they used to get. So from the open water fisheries, and 60% of animal protein intake for the average Bangladeshis come from open water fisheries, which is like free for them. These are some figures about how much loss we had to incur due to the natural disasters in the last few years. And if you see carefully, you will note that some of the figures are higher than the total amount that the Global North has committed for the loss and damage package. So we do have this loss and damage package in the UN negotiation process that has been set up, but the amount of commitment that has come from the Global North, which we take or we plead that it's their responsibility to compensate us as climate debt, that amount is much less than the loss that Bangladesh is incurring for these recurrent natural disasters. These are the sectoral losses, how much we lose in fishery, agriculture, road infrastructure, housing, water supply system, forestry, and embankments. I'm not going to read out the details of this. And this is, next time when I come to Japan, I'll learn some Japanese, I promise. So this is the migration status, you see. So it is being feared that top 5 countries in Asia will have this number of population who will be internally displaced. And the number of population that will be internally displaced is much higher than the population of some countries of the world. So you can imagine the seriousness of the problem we'll be dealing with. Then probably there's just one last slide. This is about how children will also be displaced. 43.1 million children will be displaced globally, 3.3 million in Bangladesh, 26% in South Asia due to the natural disasters that will be induced by climate change. So I think I would stop my presentation here. And if there are questions, either me will answer or the moderator will answer. No? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rizwana. And we heard the dire impacts of climate on Bangladesh. And, we have actually heard that 1/3 of the eighth most populated country in the world may go under as a result of the climate impacts. And I just want to just see whether there are any questions. Maybe I can take one question for Rizwana, if there is. Yes, please.
Hello. Within your slides, you showed the women standing on top of the sandbags at the time of the tidal surge. Do they spend the whole day like that? And does that mean they're not able to join any sort of productive activities that day? Do they have to stay sitting there all day?
That is during the time of disaster. So when there is a tidal surge or cyclone, it is a very common thing to observe in Bangladesh. During those disaster days, they sit on those bags just to protect the embankment from breaching completely. On other days, they get back to normal productive activities.
Thank you so very much, Rizwana. And we will move on to the next speaker, Wiki Amoko, who comes from the island state Papua New Guinea. And Wiki is a senior litigation lawyer. So from one lawyer to the next lawyer, we are going to hear from. And Wiki is from the Center for Environmental Law and Community Rights, Friends of the Earth, PNG, Papua New Guinea. Wiki has been with CELCOR, the acronym, for what I've explained earlier. She has been with CELCOR for 5 years, and Wiki works a lot on marine and forestry issues. So let's listen to what are the impacts and challenges that the communities are facing in Papua New Guinea. Wiki.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here before you all to share with you the climate change experiences that the country is. Can you hear me from the back? Okay, raise hands if you can hear me. Thank you. So I'm glad to be here with you all this afternoon. I'd be sharing with you some of the experiences that Papua New Guinea has in regards to climate change and its impact that is currently affecting the whole world. So from the perspective of Papua New Guinea, I'll be sharing some slides on this this afternoon. So just briefly, I'd like to just show you, if we can go to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. So Papua New Guinea is located in the Southwest Pacific, and you can see it's there, it's highlighted in red. And the population there is about 15 million. Currently, we are going through a constant, running counting the population again. So this might not be the actual population that we have. It may be running into the 20 million. And one thing unique about Papua New Guinea is that it has 800 and more languages in that island state. And it is filled with 1,000 tribes, they say, or we say. And Papua New Guinea is also known for its biodiversity. And we have a good number of endemic species that are also being currently threatened by the climate change effects that's currently happening. And we have one of the, I would say, a very big forest covering the whole of Papua New Guinea. That's like a 2/3 of it. And yes, we are rich in natural resources, I should say. So however, the impacts of climate change are already being felt in Papua New Guinea, and it is leading to environmental changes and global warming concerns, which I will be sharing with you all. One of the things that contributes to the climate change issues there, internally, I should say, not from the external, but internally, is that we have a lot of extractive industries that's ongoing currently. We have mining, forestry, and not just terrestrial mining, but we are also venturing into deep seabed mining as well. And fishing. So those are some of the extractive industries that we have that is currently contributing to the effects of the climate change. We can continue to the next slide, please. Okay, I think I've touched on this, that Papua New Guinea is among the top 20 countries most vulnerable in the world to the impacts of climate change. Over the past few years, we've seen a rise in our temperature. You can see on the presentation in front there that from 0.8 to 0.9 degrees Celsius. So the temperature is not getting any, it's not decreasing, it's rising. And in PNG, we've been experiencing very high when it comes to, we just like, sometimes we have long droughts of, times when we don't have rain at all, but when the rain comes, it's pretty very high. And and with that, it brings along flooding and other issues that affect the nation as a whole. Also, you will see that PNG is also in the Pacific Ring of Fire. So that also involves, it brings out volcanic eruptions from time to time, as well as earthquakes that we have that is currently affecting the country as well. Okay, some of the pictures here that we are going to show here this afternoon are effects of climate changes. Just this year, we had a high precipitation of very heavy rainfalls early this year, and we had casualties during those times. This happened in the hinterlands, not along the coast of the coastal parts of the country, but in the highlands. And you can see that a big number of casualties were taken, their lives were taken during this time. So we have landslides, flooding. The most recent one, which is currently, we are still reeling from its effect, is the May 2024. That's at the bottom slide there. About 2,000, a whole village was buried underneath. Let's go to the next slide. So some of the effects here, you can see there's flooding there. Infrastructure is also been affected. That's one of the highways we have along the coastal provinces that is currently being washed away by the rising sea levels. Let's continue to the next. Okay, this one too happened early this year. very heavy flooding, if you may have heard about River Sepik. So along the coastline and also along the river, that's very heavy flooding, and there were casualties during that flooding as well too. So you can see the most impacted population is the one that's, most of them are from the rural areas. Next slide, please. This is one of, I think it was also branded as the first environmental refuges, that's Carteret Island. You can see this coconuts are being already standing in the sea now. Most of the refugees were moved, but I think they still have issues. They still have issues. Some have gone back to the island. I don't know how they're living, but that's one of the climate change, one of the effects of climate change that's currently happening now. Oh, sorry, the global warming. And then the sea level rising along the coastline, it's the same as Bangladesh shared. We face the same issues. Next. So these are some of the pictures that we have, rising sea levels. It also affects our, let's go to the next. Yes, so because of the rise in temperature, we've also experienced our gardens and, agriculture suffering because of the rise in, temperature. So you can see that's drought in the highlands where most of the gardens just were not producing any more food. The people were starving. Let's go to the next. And all that leads to human health too. So you can see similarly like Bangladesh, water issues, and then we have conditions like diarrhea that's affecting most children who are affected by this disease. Let's go to the next. So those are some of the loss and damages that we've seen. One of the activities that I would highlight here is to do with the liquefied natural gas energy that's currently hitting the country. We have about, currently there is one happening, and then we have Total Energy or the Papua LNG, which was currently delayed. We have 5, in fact, but only 2 or 3 off the ground. And these are fossil fuels, and they actually, they are the most, that's where most of the GHG emissions have been contributed from and is currently affecting the country. So you would note that in the past, we didn't have so much of GHG or this kind of emissions. We were not producing that much, but due to the rise in the extractive industries that we've had currently with forestry and LNG projects and mining as well, we've seen that it has impacted the country adversely. Okay, let's go to the next. Okay, can you go to the next again? Sorry. The next, yeah, okay, that one. So this is a coalition of partners, alliance of some partners that we've had who were able to successfully stop the Papua LNG. I should say it has just been delayed because of funding issues. The main financier from the French government, from France, actually pulled out. So the project hasn't kicked off, but we are looking at it might be kicking off soon, getting off the ground soon, because of our government is looking for other finances. Okay, let's go to the next. Yep. Okay, so just to conclude, Papua New Guinea is already bearing the brunt of climate change. And like every other countries, as we've heard from Bangladesh. And one of them for us is to do with the fossil fuel energy, which is currently going big in PNG. And in this symposium, it is an avenue where I can come and speak also for PNG and also for other alliances to join us in the fight against this to stop supporting fossil fuel expansion. And so in order to reduce carbon footprints and support climate resilient infrastructure development. And we can also promote climate smart agriculture and water management practices. Yeah. Thank you. I think I'll
Okay, thank you so much, Vicky. I'm going to just move forward with the next speaker, but before I move on to the next speaker, I've been asked to check if the trans receiver is working well for the Japanese language. It's good? Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And I just want to let everyone know that the all the presentations that you will hear from today's meeting, today's what do you call that? Symposium, sorry. Thank you. I lost my word for a while. Symposium are all on the Friends of the Earth Japan website. So please, you can download them there. All right, so we're going to move to the third speaker, and our third speaker is from another island state, from Indonesia, the Indonesian archipelago. We have got Zenzi Suhadi, who is the Executive Director of Wahana Lingkungan Hidup, Friends of the Earth Indonesia. He comes from this beautiful island of Sumatra, from this place called Bengkulu, and he works out of Jakarta. So Zenzi is a biologist, and he investigates into corporate crimes and has been working for the past 23 years with WALHI. So we'll listen to what's happening with Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you, Teva. Selamat sore, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for having me here. I have long presentation. This is 27 slide, and I have 15 minutes. So Hannah, please help me. You can count until 7 per slide. You can directly move until slide number 23. Yeah. No, you can starting from the beginnings, and in every slide you count 7 and then moves. 7 seconds. This is will make people can recognize the picture. Yeah. You can starting from the first slide. I'm Zenzi Swadi. I'm Executive Director of WALHI. WALHI is the largest environmental forum in Indonesia. We have member 530 organization in Indonesia. Indonesia is the largest archipelagos countries. We are also the biggest country have rainforest in Indonesia in the world after Brazil and Congo, and we have the biggest biodiversity in the world from the terrestrial and marine. I want to presenting that in the past, Indonesia have 2 seasons, rain season and dry seasons. But right now, the season already changed. Dry season be a forest fire season. We call HES seasons, where are HES from forest fire coming to Singapore, to Malaysia, to Thailand. And in rain season, we call right now flooding seasons. In the north areas of the world, like the Europes, people will thinking in season, next summer we will vacation in to where areas. And next week we will eat what food. But in Indonesia right now, next season we will got what disaster. And next week we will get what change of the environmental. I won't talk about the loss and damage. What the loss and what the damage. We lost island, we lost livelihood, we lost houses, we lost plantations areas, we lost forests, and what the damage? The damage is landsliding, floodings, typhoons. This is come every years. And in the past, the grab is important places for people in Indonesia. But right now, not only our houses, not only our land we lost, our grab, when our day, we also need have places in the earth. Okay. Come to 23. Besides talk about what we lost and damage, I want to talk what we can do on the climate change. Okay, next, until 23. Okay, here. We already lost many island in Indonesia. We have 17,000 island, but day by day, one by one, we lost islands. There are people live in the small island in Indonesians. They have three in their lives. In the land, company grab their lands, and in the coastal, every years, 100 meters abrasion in the coast. And the marine waste, plastic waste coming to the marines. And last years, they have decision, first one, how to protect the island. Day by day, they planting mangroves. But climate change, not only by themselves, climate change causes of the large economics. So they choose one the biggest companies have emitted in the world. This is Switzerland companies, cement companies in Switzerland. They bring the company to the court to have payment, to have recognized that beside they profit, the large profits, they grab other livelihood in other words. So right now, in the Switzerland, the court process the law. And next, day by day, children, women, and tourism, this island after they against the companies, the island be a famous in Indonesia. Every day, 1,000 people coming there, and every people coming there, they should planting the mangrove in the coastal. Next. Okay, next. This is process law in Switzerland. The message from this lawsuit, climate change causes of all of us. So if we want end of the climate change, the earth need aware from all of us. In the world, environmental, ecological spread by the authorities, by the border of the countries, by the power of the state. But what the change in the world cannot spread by the countries. Already 27 years, all of the leaders in the countries in the world talk about the climate change. But during UNFCCC, from the 2000 until now, emissions still increasing. Emitting still increasing. So we know that we cannot depending with the power. We cannot depending with the state. If we want see and feel better in the world, we should do from ourselves. This is why people in Polopari, they not following what the our state decision. Our country give the concession to the company to make tourism there. They reject the companies. They create economic with themselves. Why? Because if some countries create the law not following the humanities, we not so following what the regulation. Because this regulation will bring us to the wrong way. Next slide. We also working in 29 provinces in Indonesia. We working with the 1,000 families, 1,100 families in Indonesia. We restore 1.5 million hectares of the forest in Indonesia. And we produce 33 spices and food. And our farmer directly export to around of the country in the north, include in Japan. So we recover what the damage in our sites, and we want also contribute to people in the world with our species and our food produce. And if in next time you buy our coffee from Indonesia, this is you not only pay the coffee, this is mean you contribute to planting trees in Indonesia. Next, this one sample, where is we working from 2004 and need 16 years to showing what the recover. If you see the white like line, this is not lines, this is river already increasing volume of the waters. This one. So the river recover after we recover the forest, like this. After we recover the forest, the economic in community also increasing, more than 3 times than before. Next slide. This other sample, we need 19 years for showing the differences by the satellite. So we think that in the future, climate change causes of the economics. So if we want to see different situation in the earth, we should change our economy on the world. Right now, economic in the world controlled by the powers. So in future, we should growing economic following what the earth capacities, what the earth systems. If we want make the earth be heritage to next generations. Okay, the last one. Thank you very much. This Pulihkan Indonesia mean restore Indonesians, restore the rights, restore environmental, and restore economics. Thank you very much. Arigato gozaimasu.
Thank you very much, Zenzi. And we have completed our 3 speakers for this session. I can perhaps allow one question for either one of our speakers here from Indonesia or PNG, for Wiki or Zenzi. Is there a question you would like to direct to either one of these speakers? And if there is none, it's fine as well. Okay, Thank you very much. And I would like to invite you to give a hand to all three speakers. And I would like to pass on back to Akiko. And thank you very much for being a really nice set of audience.
ベイバさん、ありがとうございます。それでは
Thank you very much. That brings us to an end of session one. We will have a 10-minute break. So please be ready to start again from 3:10 p.m. We also have a table with some items for sale of some materials at the entrance, so please take a look if you like. As mentioned, we also have the slides of each of the presenters available on the FOE Japan page, so please take a look at them, or you can use them as a reference after you've returned home as well. Thank you, and a 10-minute break.
はい、改めまして第2
And once again, we'd like to get started on today's second session. This is under the name of Climate Solutions, False Solutions in Our Region. We will be having Lisa from FOE International, Lisa Masson, who will be moderating this session. Welcome to the front, Lisa.
Thanks you very much. Hi everyone, my name is Lise. My pronouns are she, her. I work for Friends of the Earth International on issues related to climate justice and energy. I'm very privileged to work across this powerful federation. I'm very honored to be here with you all today, and I'm very excited to introduce you to a very powerful and amazing panel of speakers for this session. Now, we've just heard about the devastating impacts of climate change across the region. And at the same time, as these impacts have grown in violence and in frequency, all movements have been calling for climate justice for decades. But at the same time, as these calls have grown and gone more powerful, climate justice has become a buzzword that's been captured by corporations that are keen to continue the fossil fuel era. And under the smokescreen of net zero, of clean gas, of carbon offsets, this industry is keen to continue making profit from the devastation of our communities and of our environment. So we're going to dive into those smoke screens and those greenwashing efforts across a panel of 4 different sessions. And first, I'm going to introduce you to Parish Chowdhury from Bangladesh Environmental Lawyers Association, BELA, to talk about fossil fuel expansion in Asia Pacific.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Before I start, I'd just like to apologize. I think we've seen some really nice presentations, and my PowerPoint's a little bit sparse compared to everyone else's. But I'm sorry I haven't had time to make it look too pretty. My country right now is in the midst of massive civil unrest, where students have been protesting for economic justice, and the government has retaliated very brutally and heavily. Last night, a state of emergency was declared, and the military has been deployed. And there is a connection to what I'm going to be talking about, so I'll come back to that at the end. I'd like to just start with this map. Yeah. So this is a map from the Global Energy Monitor, which is looking at all the coal projects. All the red you see are operational coal power plants. All the green is those that have been announced or are in pre-permission stages, and all the blue are the ones that are under construction. I think it's worth really sort of internalizing this map because it'll speak a lot to the trends that we're seeing with coal, which in many cases are positive, but there are some issues that we have to continue campaigning on. So I'd like to start talking about coal with the fact that in 2021, China, which was at that point the largest coal financier in the world, announced that it was going to stop coal financing abroad as part of its net zero obligations. This announcement in 2021 was also accompanied by similar commitments from South Korea and Japan, which were also two major coal financiers in the region. In my country, in Bangladesh, the effect that this had was the immediate cancellation of 10 coal power plants because while the government claimed they were doing it out of climate obligations, it was really because they had no money to actually make it. The investment scenario for coal was changing very rapidly. In Japan, JICA maintained two high-profile exceptions to this policy, one of which was the Matarbari Phase 2 in the southeast of Bangladesh, and the other one was the Indramayu Phase 4 in Indonesia. But eventually, both of these projects had to be canceled as well because of the immense sustained pressure that civil society campaigners and people put on the Japanese government. Across the region and globally as well, not just in Asia, coal development has hit a new low, and this is good news. This is optimistic news. And the amount of cancellations of coal projects that were planned is almost as much as the total operational coal capacity in the region put together. So this is very good news. We seem to be exiting the coal era, which was, of course, one of the most harmful fossil fuels that we use. But there are exceptions to this. China and India are the two major exceptions to the trends in coal, and they account for 82% of the pre-construction capacity, which means those projects that have been announced are awaiting permission or have been permitted, but construction has not started. 82% of that capacity is focused in these two countries alone. 2/3 of new coal power, which equates to about 47 gigawatts, was coming online in 2023, was focused in China. Indonesia and India, with about 5.9 and 5.5 gigawatts each, were the next two countries on that list. And 70% of coal power that is still being considered, that's still being debated about whether they're going to go ahead with these projects, is located in China. India is a distant but still very significant second on that list, with about 12% of all coal power that's still under consideration. But one of the things that I think we have to think about here that complicate the scenario, in addition to the fact that there are these two major outliers of developing economies that are still reliant on coal, is that coal power plant retirements are slowing. And there's a big reason for that, and this is what we're talking about when we talk about the false solutions. Because the companies or the governments which are propagating the fossil age have come up with certain false solutions which are there to extend the coal age, which by any means we see is approaching its end. In my country, there's only one coal power plant left under construction, which back in 2018, when we were building the new sort of power sector strategy, there were going to be 30 of these coal power plants to come online. Most have been canceled, some have been built, and only one remains under construction, and work has really slowed on that. To go into the next thing is gas. So this is really what is replacing coal. right now. You can see that it's spreading all over the region at a rapid pace. Asia is the epicenter of the gas expansion of the world. 65% of new gas-fired capacity is located in the Asia-Pacific region. Southeast Asian countries have combined planned investments of 220 billion US dollars towards rapidly scaling up gas capacity. The implementation of this plan would see a doubling of gas capacity in the region. This is primarily because LNG is often promoted as a cleaner alternative to coal, but it's not. You know, it's an extension of the fossil fuel malpractice that has led us into a climate crisis. The narrative that's really taken a hold is that gas is a transition fuel. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means. It's being used to say that it facilitates the energy transition, but what we're seeing is that it's not a transition to renewables, it's a transition to coal, to gas itself. Many Asian governments are aggressively pursuing LNG expansion because they see this as a way to pursue energy security. Many of our countries are developing countries. They do require and they do have the right to increase the amount of power required as their economies grow. But this is now sort of going down the LNG line. But due to the volatility and high prices of LNG in the international spot market, particularly after 2022 and the Russia-Ukraine war, many global South countries which have dived into the LNG expansion have found themselves under massive economic stress and taking on humongous amounts of debt. So as we're seeing, gas is becoming a poor choice, not only environmentally, but also economically. I want to talk about one particular case study, which I think is relevant to the people in this room as well, which is the Bangladesh's Integrated Energy and Power Master Plan. This is a master plan that was devised by the Institute of Energy Economics here in Japan, and they were brought on as consultants by JICA to devise this plan. JICA has been part of Bangladesh's energy development for a long time now. They devised our last power sector master plan as well, which was in 2016 with its update in 2018. And that power sector master plan was a 5-year plan that brought about the massive coal investment in my country that I was talking about earlier. So the new IEPMP, the Integrated Energy and Power Master Plan, was approved in November 2023 during the UNFCCC COP in Dubai, right before the energy minister of my country was about to board his flight to get to COP and talk about how much we're doing for our climate obligations. The Japan Center for Sustainable Environment and Society, JAXA, termed the IEPMP as a plan soaked in fossil fuels and not aligned with the Paris Agreement. According to the Institute of Energy Economics and Financial Analysis, the plan does not pay adequate attention to overcapacity, renewable energy, or the risks of the unproven technologies and fuels that are being pushed through this plan. As I mentioned before, the last power sector master plan that they did, which turned out to lead to very much bad investments, was a 5-year plan. Where they get the audacity to make a 30-year plan after that, I don't really know. The IEPMP projects that the country's peak power demand will reach 27.1 gigawatts in 2030, following a 7% growth per annum, and 84.6 gigawatts by 2050. Currently, Bangladesh's peak demand is about 17 gigawatts. And the current installed capacity is around 26 gigawatts. So there is already a big overcapacity issue emerging in the country. So the IEPMP estimates that we will need an aggressive expansion of the installed capacity to get to about 35.5 gigawatts of installed capacity. Current overcapacity is really high. In 2022, this number reached 40%. 40% of all installed capacity in Bangladesh was lying idle because we just don't need that much power. And this has been a sign of the low efficiency in the system that is pervasive. We have something called high capacity payments where you have to pay independent power providers for even if the power plants are lying idle. Bangladesh spends millions and millions of dollars every month paying power plants which are just sitting there. They're not doing anything. If they can't provide fuel, as we're seeing with the fact that they could not buy LNG for 10 months after the Russia-Ukraine war started, all of those gas power plants still got paid. The IEPMP continually dismisses renewable energy. I was in many of the stakeholder consultations with JICA as they were devising this plan, and their attitude towards renewables was more than, let's say, dismissive. One particular anecdote I want to bring up is when I brought up the fact that, you know, most of the projections that we're seeing is a massive reduction in prices of renewable energy, solar and wind. And what we're seeing is volatility in LNG. So why are we focusing so much on expanding LNG? The answer that they gave us was, well, by 2040, most European countries will have transitioned to renewables, thereby stabilizing LNG prices. And the question I had for them is that then you're talking about dumping. We are a dumping ground for LNG. They also took an interesting step to remove the phrase green energy and replace it with clean energy. And there's a very important distinction here because clean energy includes things like nuclear, things like carbon capture and storage, hydrogen, ammonia co-firing, which magically seem to make coal even clean energy. The fuel mix put forward by the IEPMP for the 2041 target that they have under the advanced technology scenario has room for 24% domestic production with renewables. Just LNG alone has 27% under their plan. The government of Bangladesh has committed to getting to 40% of renewables by 2041. So the plan that JICA has made undermines their own commitments. The trajectory of renewable energy prices, one of the main arguments we hear in Bangladesh is about intermittency, is about unreliability. We can't use solar panels at night. But even with battery systems attached, the price of renewables is now competitive with the capital investment required to expand LNG. And, excuse me, instead what JICA has done is it has created a market with this plan in Bangladesh, and it has offered a lot of unproven technology and false solutions such as CCS, hydrogen, and ammonia co-firing to extend the life and to validate the investments made into fossil fuels that it had already advised us to make. Many civil society actors in Bangladesh have come out and said that JICA's plan is a plan that serves Japan's interests. It's a plan for the Japanese government. It's not a plan for the Bangladeshi government. And that's not to say JICA is the only bad actor here. Issues with transparency, what I mentioned before, the struggling of LNG procurement amongst an economic slowdown, and high levels of cronyism and corruption in the Bangladesh government as well, has already seen a massive economic uncertainty emerge in Bangladesh. What I was talking about at the beginning about students protesting, this is part of that. The economic downturn has led many families to not be able to afford the same standard of living that they had just 3 years ago, because our public money has been dumped into these false solutions. I want to leave you all with just my questions before I take any of your questions. If LNG is a so-called transition fuel, when will that transition happen? The average lifespan is at least 30 years. So is the transition going to happen 30 years from now? If ammonia is being used to keep the lifespan of the coal economy alive, when do we actually transition away from the coal age that led us down this crisis path? And if carbon capture, storage, and hydrogen production is only going to require more usage of natural gas and more usage of fossil fuels, when do we actually get the energy transition that we have all been demanding? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barish. And if you have any questions for panelists, I'm going to ask you to please keep a note of them, and we'll take questions at the end of the presentations. Thank you so much again, Barish. I'm now going to welcome our next two speakers to talk about an issue that's very live across the region, which is the issue of plastics. So please welcome Chelani Rubasinghe from Center for Environmental Justice, Friends of the Earth Sri Lanka, and Luna Yu from KFEM, Friends of the Earth Korea.
Thank you, Liz. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chalani from Friends of the Earth Sri Lanka, or Center for Environmental Justice, and I have here with me.
Hi, I'm Luna from Korea Federation for Environmental Movements.
So we will be talking about how plastic is related to climate crisis. Next slide, please. And the next. Okay, so plastic. Just a while ago, we heard the link of fossil fuels as a false solution. And plastic is directly related, as the building blocks of fossil-based plastics is coming from fossil fuels. So according to the World Economic Forum, about 4 to 8% of annual global oil consumption is associated with plastics. So plastics, throughout its life cycle, is associated with emitting greenhouse gases. So these greenhouse gases caused climate change. As we all know, the carbon footprint is about the calculation of emission of greenhouse gases. So transportation, production, and disposal, which includes sometimes recycling, incineration, are all emit greenhouse gases. So more we use these plastics, more we incorporate plastics into the consumer cycle, we increase the emission of these greenhouse gases, inducing climate change. Next slide, please. So this is a calculation, a quantification of amount of greenhouse gases that plastics emits to the environment. So this is the end of life amounts, and this is production and conversion rates, and altogether cumulatively this shows the total amount of greenhouse gases that plastic life cycle can be associated with within an year. In a quantity, it's like 1.79 billion metric tons. So compared to the total emission of greenhouse gases, this accounts for around 3.3% of greenhouse gases. Next slide, please. So plastic is not only a bad guy in climate change, it is also causing many other negative influences on many stages, on environment, on human, and then on biodiversity as well. Considering the impact on human, plastics contain thousands of chemical additives that now have identified as either carcinogenics that cause cancer or impacts our hormone functioning, which we call as endocrine disruptors. And also, these plastics can contain persistent organic pollutants that once released to the environment, they will not go out from it. And it may cause many serious negative impacts on human and wildlife as well. So CJ has conducted many studies, and we have identified many chemicals of these kinds in our toys and consumer products that we use in our day-to-day life. So we can be contaminated with these chemicals when we consume our food, beverages, and even when we touch these products. Next slide, please. So this is a picture from Sri Lanka. When we dump these plastics and especially polythene bags, these wildlife are associated with many negative impacts as well. So not only on land, but also in the marine ecosystem, plastics can cause negative impacts on wildlife. It's because of mostly the mismanagement and disposal, but production cannot be excluded. Next slide, please. So this is what happened in Sri Lanka in 2021. A ship carrying plastic noodles and what we call as epoxy resins, which is used in plastics, caught a fire near Sri Lankan waters and disposed accidentally. Thousands of these plastic pellets account for 12,000 metric tons of plastic noodles and epoxy resins together. And when we tested these plastic pellets and the chunks of burnt plastics, we found many endocrine disrupting chemicals they are contaminated with. And it will take years, hundreds and thousands of years to get rid of these chemicals and plastic pellets. So it causes a massive, irreversible impact on the environment, the whole life cycle. There are evidence from studies which shows how the plastics used in agriculture are associated with microplastic contamination. And research also shows microplastics in the environment as well as in human blood and air. So the impact of plastic is greater than what we can see. Next slide, please. So this is another problem associated with plastic. We call it waste colonialism. The waste that you may very cleanly dispose, segregated, may end up in one of these countries in South Asia that does not have enough adequate facilities to handle them. So these being dumped, and sometimes incineration cause pollution of the surrounding environment, and exposure to them will be the communities residing around them. So it is a false narration if you just say that problem of plastic is only associated with management and disposal. It is also a problem of production. So this is a Japanese exports, but it doesn't say that only Japan is exporting this much. Around the world, some countries of the global north exports this waste to global south countries for disposal. This is actually, the next slide, please. Yeah, this is a set of other problems associated with plastic. Waste colonialism, as I spoke to you earlier, and then chemical pollution through consumer products, emissions in production, emissions in disposal, inadequate national laws that support proper management of plastics, neglecting equitable just transition of waste breakers, and also promoting false solutions such as recycling being promoted as a solution to plastic. That is not true because the percentage of recycling is very low compared to the production. So with this, I hand over to Luna to talk about one of the solutions the globe is working right now?
Okay, once again, good afternoon. I'm Luna from South Korea. To start this part, I will give you a brief explanation for those who may be unfamiliar with what is GPT. In March 22, at the resumed fifth session of the UN Environmental Assembly, a historical resolution was adopted to develop an international, legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. The resolution requested the executive director of UN Environmental Program to convince an intergovernment negotiation committee to develop the instrument, which is to be based on a comprehensive approach that address the full life cycle of plastic, including its production, design, and disposal. The INC began its work during the second half of 2022 with the ambition to complete the negotiation by the end of 2024. We have now completed the first session, and the fifth session will be held in Korea this November 25th to 1st December. Next page. During the previous meetings, member states discussed objects, scopes, regulations, and means of implementations. INC Secretariat revealed 3 versions of the text, which is zero draft, revised draft, and compilation of draft text. You can see the website, whole text on UNEP website. The link is there. Countries made efforts to build shared understanding and streamline the text, but the differences among countries is still significant. Primary plastic polymers and chemical of concern, problematic products and product design are some of the key issues being addressed in the treaty negotiation. You can read more about them below and at the link above. Next page, please. KFEM and Friends of the Earth are active in the process of developing an ambitious new global plastic treaty that seeks to end plastic pollution by dramatically reducing plastic production, consumption, and trade. In this context, we are demanding binding rules, not a voluntary approach, ambitious global target to reduce plastic production, not greenwashing or poor solution, and etc. You can find the detail at the link, so please refer to it if you need. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much to both of you. Now we're going to bring the conversation home here in Japan and look a bit into the Japanese green transformation strategy. To do so, please welcome Ayumi Fukakusa from Friends of the Earth Japan.
Thank you very much. So she will be presenting in Japanese. Hello, everybody, and thank you once again, everybody, for joining us for this symposium. Today, I am in charge of climate change and energy programs at FOE Japan. My name is Ayumi. So I will be speaking about, as mentioned, Japan's so-called green transformation, or what is being called the GX strategy. And I'm going to speak about some of the problems in regards to this. Next slide, please. So first of all, in the background information, As we've heard from the other speakers today, we've heard that most of them are not very large emitters, but Japan actually, I would like to remind you, is even today still a large emitter of greenhouse gases. This figure shows the historical cumulative emissions of Japan, and we can see here that the volume of emissions from each of these countries, and so you can see that Japan is 6th largest emitter in the world. In a single year, it is also the biggest emitter after the US, China, India, Russia, and the EU here listed as well. Next, please. And in regards to Japan's responsibility, it doesn't only stop at domestic emissions as well. This graph shows the annual average of public funds which were invested by G20 countries in fossil fuel projects during the period of 3 years between 2019 and 2021. And through this, we can see, well, public funds is referring to those where the Japanese government invests 100% of or financial institutions which are wholly owned by the Japanese government. And so we can see that these were the most numerous, providing significant support to fossil projects abroad, even up to 2019. For example, we heard the examples from Bangladesh. We also heard about Indonesia, for example, where Japan is providing the funds for the construction of a thermal power plant. This is also not only in Asia, but even for LNG development in the United States or also Africa, for example. For example, the Japan Bank for International Cooperation, or JBIC, or also other funds in which financial institutions where the Japanese government is putting for 100% of the funds are investing a great amount of money on projects such as fossil fuel extraction that encourages emissions. So this graph shows also the flow of so-called public funds, but also private banks, which also provide a large amount of either loans or also financing for final products. So this is showing not only the public finance, but also these private finance for many of these projects. So in 2020, Japan declared under the then Suga administration that by the year 2050, it would achieve virtually zero emissions. At the time of making this declaration, it also revised the emission reduction targets, but this was at 2030, so 7 years later, saying to revise at 46% of the 2013 level, which is inadequate. Under the current Kishida government, this green transformation was launched as the new strategy of the Japanese government. And the government defines this GX as a transformation to use as little fossil fuel as possible and utilize instead clean energy. It also looks at how to do this to achieve a balance between both emissions reductions and also economic growth. So it said that in the next 10 years, there will be 150 trillion yen of private investment into this. And it has been announced what kind of industries this will be. But the GX strategy, if you look at the contents more closely, it does include, of course, some environmental and climate change measures, but it is more an investment and economic policy rather than a climate change measure. It does include energy conservation or renewable energy, but also the promotion of nuclear power, hydrogen, ammonia, CCS, and these kind of false solutions. It also does not include any definition of what they mean by green when they say green transformation. And rather, instead of that, technologies that promote emissions have been included in this strategy. So when we say GX and when we look at this and how the Japanese government is trying to spread this towards other Asian countries, this is also related to ASIC, the Asia region, the policy that as Prime Minister Kishida was traveling around different countries in Asia, and also when he's speaking in Asia, he's very much, in Japan as well, he's promoting this policy as well, saying that, we'll go to the next slide to catch up. So this is the ASEC, the Asia Zero Emission Community. And so he's talking about cooperation by Japan and different countries in order to achieve decarbonization of the region. However, as we mentioned, within this framework, if we actually look at the contents, it's focused on ammonia, CCS, gas, hydrogen, and so on, which are technologies that do not contribute to reduction of emissions. And so rather, it's a government policy of having many companies, private companies, involved in this kind of projects throughout the Asian region. And we mentioned about hydrogen, ammonia, and CCS, and so on from earlier. But as we've said, they do not lead to decarbonization. Of course, within the science field and so on, they have been used for various things. However, it's often said by both the government and private companies in Japan that they contribute to decarbonization. However, this is only because they do not emit carbon dioxide during the time of combustion. Rather, they are actually made from fossil fuels. And if we look at, for example, the plants that JICA was involved in, as we already heard, this is also looking at their being used for co-firing, for example, in thermal power plants. What is needed at the moment is a breaking away from fossil fuels. However, the way that this is being implemented is actually rather just strengthening dependence on existing fossil fuels and also making a longer lifespan for these kind of plants and technologies. In the case of CCS, or carbon capture and storage, in Japan, this is often mentioned about capturing carbon by installing it in thermal power plants or steel mills and so on. And so this is the kind of plans which are in place in Japan at the moment. And the target is to store by the year 2050 120 to 240 million tons of CO2. This is a huge amount. Japan's annual emissions are around actually, so this is showing a huge amount of this goal. But this, as we mentioned, actually very similar to the ammonia co-firing as well, is actually just looking at using the existing fossil fuels infrastructure, therefore prolonging the use of thermal power stations, just the same as for hydrogen and ammonia. In addition, the actual number of cases across Japan is increasing in regards to this. It said, for example, they're working towards having this in place by the year 2030, but testing's going on in Hokkaido, for example. We can see that there is not a clear pathway for when that is actually going to be able to be used. In Japan, what is being done at the moment is actually looking at increasing co-firing with biomass fuel rather than hydrogen or ammonia. And actually, biomass fuel being regarded as carbon neutral in Japan, and then using this in coal-fired power plants as an emission measure is what is being put forward by the Japanese government and companies at the moment. However, there are, of course, many concerns about this, which is, for example, looking at the reliance on imported fuels, which connects to biodiversity and deforestation concerns, and also increased emissions as well. So these are some of the concerns which we are raising. And as well, there was also very recently news about this as well, but there have been explosion accidents in recent times at power plants where biomass is co-fired. In the case of CCS, as we mentioned, the Japanese government is currently planning to bury and to capture and store huge amounts of carbon. However, there are actually no storage sites which have been identified for this, the same as the problem with finding sites for nuclear waste as well. As domestic storage is expensive, the Japanese government is now pursuing projects to export this overseas, where they think that it will be possible to store at a lower cost as well. In just the past 2 years, there are actually many different examples of this. You're looking at capturing carbon here in Japan and exporting that to other countries. There are at least 13 different projects which have been put forward by private companies to Malaysia, Indonesia, and Australia, even just in the past 2 years. In the plastic discussion as well, we talked about the issue of the waste colonialism, for example, and we can see the same thing happening in regards to carbon, which should be decreased, and the emissions should be reduced in the country in the first place. However, they're looking at just exporting this to other countries in another form of waste colonialism, which is under great criticism at the moment. In response to these developments, FOE Japan and Malaysia together submitted a letter to the Japanese government asking it to stop the promotion of CCS, as dumping carbon from developed countries into developing countries is waste colonization and contrary to climate justice. Meena Raman of FOE Malaysia said, countries like Japan are considering transferring not only their responsibility for the climate crisis, but also CO2 itself to other countries. This is a ridiculous act of dumping waste in the global south. It will undermine Malaysia's own efforts to reduce emissions. Who is going to pay for technology that does not guarantee the safety of future generations? The expansion of the GX policy throughout Asia, as mentioned, has been done through, for example, ministerial meetings within the framework of ASEC, or also, as we heard from Barish as well, from JICA, for examples, policies in Bangladesh and other parts of the region as well. And it also must not forget about nuclear energy when we're looking at GX as well. Japan, of course, in the year 2011 experienced the nuclear disaster at the TEPCO Fukushima nuclear power plant, and the damage of this is still going on today. After the disaster, there was a decision made once to phase out nuclear power. However, the government changed to the Liberal Democratic Party, and this was reversed. However, even today, active promotion of nuclear power and new construction of nuclear power plants is not being discussed at the moment, at least in direct policy on such a large extent. However, within this GX policy, for the first time since the Fukushima nuclear disaster, the replacement of nuclear power plants has also been allowed. This is, of course, under the LDP government, which is a strong promoter of nuclear power. And it has also allowed for an extension of the number of years that a nuclear plant can operate. However, there is no still locations for disposal of nuclear waste. Municipalities where nuclear power plants are located are opposed to their restarting as well. The price of nuclear power has risen over the past decade, while the price of renewables has fallen. There are some efforts to develop small nuclear reactors. However, there is no proven experience of this or success of this in Japan. However, on the other hand, we are seeing construction of small nuclear reactors, small modular reactors in the Philippines, for example. This was promoted by Japan at the Japan-US-Philippines Trilateral Summit and other meetings this year. I'd like to introduce just a little bit about some of the bilateral credit system, but I think the next speaker will be talking more about this in detail. But the bilateral credit system is a way for Japan to share its contribution to reductions in other countries and count this as a reduction for Japan. So it's not actually making emissions within Japan, but using what is reduced through its international cooperation as counting towards Japan's reduction of emissions. Japan is trying to, by the year 2030, reduce 100 million tons of CO2 by using these bilateral credits in order to achieve Japan's national targets. However, this doesn't connect at all to actual reductions within Japan. It also does not exclude hydrogen, ammonia, and CCS projects from being considered as a reduction, which is also very problematic. So from these points, they are being criticized here within Japan and also abroad, saying that Japan's so-called green transformation is in fact actually greenwashing. And so we are also conducting such campaigns here in Japan. This is also not only the Japanese government, but the companies that are promoting these things in tandem with the government as well. The Japanese government does not at the moment have any plans to phase out coal-powered power generation, which is currently the largest source of CO2 emissions, let alone gas and oil. So without having any discussion about actually reducing dependence on fossil fuels or moving away from them and just promoting technologies such as hydrogen, ammonia, and CCS is greatly problematic. But the climate crisis will not be able to stop until we can change the way our society is dependent on fossil fuels in a fundamental way. The Japanese government is emphasizing transformation, but from the different discussions going on, it doesn't actually seem that it has any direct ways that it's working towards this as well. And that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ayumi. Now we've gone through a lot of these false solutions, but there's more. So we're going to now, with our last speaker, look into another one of the fossil fuels industry's tricks. We're going to look into carbon markets and their implications for indigenous customary territories in Malaysia. And to do so, I'd like to invite Shamila Arifin on the stage. Thank you.
Hello there. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here. And thank you for coming. My name is Shamila and I'm from Friends of the Earth, Malaysia. So I'll be talking about carbon markets. Next, please. Yeah. This is my presentation outline. The core is number 2, section 2, carbon markets and indigenous customary land rights. We'll go to 3, 4, 5 if we have time. But I was also asked to explain a little bit about how carbon markets work. So next slide. The first, if you would like to know the history where all this comes from, of course, it comes from the international level, from the UNFCCC. Back in 1970, I mean, this was not that, it was the first, international human, the Conference on Environment was done. All the way, the CDM, if you ever heard about it, the Clean Development Mechanism, that's the first instance of what a carbon market would look like, and it failed. There were many critics about it. And next, you would probably have seen this somewhere. This is also the journey, the chronology of where all these false solutions come from. Next. Now, before I continue, I would just like to stress this. There is no other way to stop climate change but to reduce our emissions, to stop polluting. There is no other way. That's it. You cannot go around it anymore. If, for example, if you want to save your money, you cannot borrow money. You just have to save. You just have not to spend more. So this is the theory of it. And you cannot find any other way that tries to go around here is a false solution. On the left, you can see the natural cycle, which, it goes to a drain, the blue one there. But on the right, whatever solution that they say to drain this thing out is not going to happen, So we will talk about how a carbon market is one of these solutions. Next, carbon offset. Essentially, it's this. It's an offset. That's the word. You emit 1 unit of carbon, and if you can supposedly save 1 emission, reduce or avoid, then it's an offset. This is how fundamentally supposedly they envision that this thing will work. Second, next. Okay, then after the word offset, there is the word credit. What does credit mean? It means a debt. Yeah. So it's a carbon credit, it's a carbon debt. If you pay your debt now, then you can pollute later. That is the concept. So it takes the form of a permit or certificate that can be traded, which gives credit rights to credit holders to emit a certain amount of carbon during a certain period of time. Holders of carbon rights, this is like the right to a forest or carbon-rich system, but also artificial storage will receive payment, and then the buyers of carbon credit will make the payment. The payment assumes that a high carbon, like a company, will pay the holders in return of the latter, ensuring that such carbon will continue to be sequestered or be kept in either the natural or the artificial system. That's the deal. That's the business deal. Yeah. Now, the credits are assumed to have been generated by activities of projects that have supposedly avoided or removed greenhouse gas emissions. So there is all these terms: reduced emissions, avoided emissions, and every carbon market project can be a little bit different. It can be from, halting deforestation. It can be like installing solar or what. So we are now beginning, and you will see many, many projects that might claim this, but they all may be a little bit different. Next. There are two types of carbon market. One is a regulated, this is between businesses, and then there is the unregulated one, which is a voluntary one. So in the first one, you can even have that situation where we trade, one company, they emit less, they can sell the credit to the other company that emits more. So this is all like putting accounting financial language in what we are trying to do, which is essentially protect the earth. Next, please. Underlying all this assumption is the concept of net zero, which is not real zero. So you can continue like number 3, emit a lot, but if you can supposedly remove or avoid, then it may count as zero. But as we have seen the bathtub just now, that's not the deal. The real deal is that you just gotta stop it. So next, it's all like a big, is a con. Basically, it's a false solution. There are many questions. For example, does carbon sequestration actually result in the real scientifically avoided or removal of the carbon dioxide? What happens if it fails? For example, a forest burns. There's no more carbon in there. What happens to the business deal? And how do you really count the carbon in an ecosystem? And actually, who owns the carbon? Is it the state? Is it the company now? Or is it the indigenous communities? And also, forests and sensitive ecosystems are not just carbon. They are homes of people. They contain biodiversity. They have social, cultural heritage and livelihood value. And they perform many ecological functions, and they reduce disaster risk. So that is the basic of a carbon market. Now, indigenous customary land rights. Where are we? Is that? Yeah, the next one. What is, yeah, I think so. Okay, so indigenous customary land rights, the word that I would like to pay attention to is customary. Many people, including in my country, people get very confused. What is it? You know, indigenous communities, why do you call it customary? The key word there is customary as opposed to documentary. We now live in a modern legal system where you can only own a property with documents issued by the government under the law. But indigenous communities may not have a document. The right to the land comes from their customs, oral customs from their ancestors. If you want to know more why the world become the way we become, that you need a paper to say you own the land, well, that is, there's colonization, there's an enclosure movement. If you're interested, you can read more. Indigenous communities, territories also have their own uniqueness. They are territory, they are a territory. They have boundaries. You must talk about inheritance, the continuous occupation, and the sustainable management of resources. So they also have, land that families own, and then there's communal land, that sort of thing. Next. Okay, in my country, these rights are actually protected by the law. Initially, the law didn't know what to do with it, but as more indigenous communities went to court, and then the courts have described them that they are actually a form of right to property, with paper or without paper is the same, is also the right to life and livelihood, and the states have an obligation to protect indigenous rights. So we right now actually should reform our laws to make it align with what the court says, what are the features of indigenous customary land rights, but that have not happened. So next, now, how does the state treated because a lot of it, they don't have the papers. So the rights are legally treated as what we call, I think it's Latin, usufructuary rights, the rights to use and benefit from the land. So it's not an ownership rights. This is why you find in many around the world, people would complain, people don't understand, why do you give a logging license over indigenous territories? Because the state still think it's state land, it's still a forest reserve or whatever. Yep, but the indigenous communities are allowed, permitted to stay there unless they are building a dam or something like this. Yeah. And the rights, they usually remain there. And this is why you have a lot of land rights conflicts. And the state also will usually determine, oh, this is from here to here, which isn't how it's supposed to be, because the rights are derived from the customs. The customs will say, actually, the land is from over there to here. It's not just this room. So as a result, we have a lot of land rights conflicts. Next. So now in the state of Sarawak, Borneo in Malaysia, land and forest, they are under state jurisdiction. This is in Borneo. They have begun amending the laws. If you can see the Forest Ordinance Amendment in 2022, they've amended the forest law and the land law and the environment law to allow carbon markets. Okay, next. Now, for example, when you want to develop a carbon market, you have all these words in the first define. The law must define all this stuff, okay? For example, carbon license means a license granted for a forest carbon activity. What is a forest carbon activity? Is it any activity, action, project, or groups of activities that leads to the emission reductions which are verified in accordance with the carbon standard, and so forth. Next. So what does this mean? The two, can you see the 2 points? What is carbon sequestration and what is carbon sink? There is this word artificial storage. There is this word pumping carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and so forth. So this implies that maybe we can import carbon for storage in Sarawak for CCUS, what Ayumi has just spoken on just now. And then there is also the third one, carbon stock also includes products of harvested trees and agricultural crops. So it's not just forests that can qualify to be in a carbon market project, and also possibly monoculture projects that actually destroy forests. Next. For the land law, you will see the definition of land now includes the air is actually the land now. According to the law. What does this is preparing for geoengineering possibly? So the land is not just land, the air above the land is also now the land, because so that you can bring it under the land law. And this all will imply that some sort of future false solution may be coming too. Yeah. And next, please. Now, what are the implications? Now, people like to say, oh, carbon market will give benefits to communities and all. But if there is poor recognition of customary rights, how are they going to become carbon rights holders and get all this money? To be carbon rights holders, your land rights must be legally secured and recognized, as this is a licensed activity. And most carbon market projects in the country most likely will not involve local communities. Yeah. Even today, the communities, the land has been used for logging and plantation and whatnot. And also, most carbon market projects most likely benefit the state, corporation, and other private parties through a license or a contract, may even promote some sort of land grabbing, and also it will promote perhaps forest conservation, whereby local communities may not be able to continue their way of life because in fulfilling the contract of the carbon market to protect that area. Next, we've got these two projects. We work especially on the first one in Sarawak, where the carbon market project proponent is actually a a monoculture plantation project. Yeah, so they say, oh, we won't cut the forest on this side of the project so that it can enter into this a carbon market project. And in Sabah, the state is being sued too for going for entering to a carbon market agreement without essentially, I think the laws are not there yet, and this is something that we need to look into. Yeah, countries need to prepare laws in order to have all these four solutions. So finally, I will stop. This is my second last slide. We can still, so how do we protect forests then? I don't know why people are really talking about all these carbon markets, but before carbon markets came, how did we protect the forest? Who protected it? The communities, or even the state, public sector. Why are we now talking like as if without carbon market, we cannot conserve forests and protect community rights? All this while we've been doing this, all this while communities have been doing this. So public approach to climate finance must be prioritized. There are many, many ways. There is ecological fiscal transfer. You can set up trust funds. There are international climate funds. Countries have to look at their reforms in tax, in budget, and strengthen community rights, of course. And I'll end with a challenge. In working together in this matter, we need to really think about the gaps. You know, the people in our countries who go to UNFCCC or CBD negotiations are often something like the Ministry of Environment or something like this. The person who knows what's needed is your local engineers, how to widen the rivers, what to do with the drains. Similarly, also civil society may have this problem. The people who monitor UNFCCC and national people working at the local level, we have to come together to monitor all these false solutions so that it will not be too late to stop such projects. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shamila, and thank you again to all of our speakers. We've got just under 5 minutes left and we've gone through a lot of content, but I'm going to check whether there's any questions from the room. Maybe we can take 1 or 2 questions for any of our panelists. So if you have a question, please put your hand up.
Thank you for your presentations. I have a question for Barish from Bangladesh. I am also, I'm working for an alternative media about Japan's GX strategy and policy. I'm looking at the ammonium co-firing and hydrogen in Bangladesh. What is your opinion about this? Do you think this is really green?
Thank you. I'm going to see if there's maybe 1 more question so we can group them because we don't have much time. Any other question? Okay, great. Barish?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think, before I tell you whether I think it's green, I don't think the Japanese government thinks it's green either. That's why they've changed the wording to say instead of green energy, it is now clean energy. The simple matter of fact is that it's not green. Ammonia co-firing is supposed to make coal cleaner, but that does not necessarily mean anything about zero emissions. In fact, it will extend the lifetime of coal, which is something globally we are momentum to move away from. But the more people are buying into this false solution, the longer we will keep coal running. And in terms of hydrogen, the Bangladesh government announced a few days ago that they're looking into setting up blue hydrogen production in the Bay of Bengal by 2035. Of course, there's a difference here. There's different types of hydrogen production, and hydrogen may possibly one day have some sort of viability in terms of maybe energy storage, but that doesn't exist as of yet. We haven't seen that evidence as of yet. And if you're expanding natural gas to make a fuel, that fuel cannot possibly be considered green in any way. And again, it's, if anything, they're calling it blue. They're not even calling it green.
Thank you, Barish. I'm going to invite all of you to join me in thanking all of our speakers again for this session, and I will pass back to Akiko. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for your moderation. And this brings us to a close of session 2. We will once again have a 10-minute break and start again from 4:30 p.m. If you are returning home now, if you will be leaving us now, please make sure you leave the radios at the entrance. They're very expensive, so make sure you don't accidentally take it with you. And once again, to remind you that we have a table at the entrance which has different information about FOE Japan, also more about climate justice, about CCS. So for those of you who would like to learn more, please take a look at the materials at the table. Thank you very much, and we'll have a 10-minute break.
はい、それでは再開したいと思いますので。
Thank you very much. We will be getting started soon, so please take your seats so we can get started with session 3. In session 3, we will be having a panel discussion looking at the real just transition. What can we do for this, and what are we looking for the Asia Pacific? We will have Hanaya to moderate from FOE Japan. Hello, everyone. Thank you for staying here until session 3 on such a hot day. Many of you have been sitting down the whole time, so please feel free to stretch, to move around a little bit to make yourself comfortable. So in session 1 and session 2, we heard first about the serious loss and damage caused by climate change from people, of course, on the front lines. And in session 2, we heard more about within the situation of the climate crisis becoming more and more serious, what the kind of measures that we are looking for in regards to climate change, the kind of just transition we should be looking for, the fact that there are many things going actually in the opposite direction. We heard about many of these challenges, but we don't want to, of course, just leave this symposium with despair or feeling just about the negative. So for this last session, we'll be looking at the real just transition and delving into that a little bit deeper, and hope to bring some hints for hope to end today's session as well. So as we're getting started, I'd actually like to ask a question for all of you here. Just transition, these words, how many of you have heard this phrase before, the phrase just transition? There's actually quite a lot of people here. That's nice to see. Thank you for sharing that. So the word just transition, this phrase is actually something which has already existed since the 1970s. It actually first came out from the labor movement in the United States at that time. And within the context of climate change, it has been talked about more widely from around 2010 at the time of COP15. Is when we've started to hear this more within this context. If we look at the Paris Agreement, at the time when that was concluded also, this is when there started to be more and more focus on the just transition. It was referenced in the preamble, for example, and at COP28 last year. Since then, much more sort of deep or detailed discussion has been pursued in regards to this. However, when we're talking about a just transition, this is often looked at, for example, looking, or within maybe more so-called developed countries, this is looking at transition of labor within the energy industry, for example, looking at how to shift from fossil fuels to renewables, and just that transition just from one kind of energy to another. And the debate is often limited just to that. However, as FOE International and of course Asia Pacific as well, this is not only about a shift in the kind of energy that we're using, the kind of energy that we're producing, but this is about a change in the whole social system itself. And so we will be hearing from different speakers up here today to delve into this about here. But when we see, of course, the situation in Gaza today, the devastation there, the invasion of Ukraine, looking at the biodiversity crisis, each of these, we cannot just look at them on an individual basis. This will not fundamentally actually resolve any of these situations. We need to change the actual structures of our very society itself in order to have a true change and true solution to these problems. So as FOE International, when we're talking about just transition, we're not only looking at the transition itself, but looking at the gaps, the disparities between peoples, between communities, how we make that more just as well. And this is also why we look at this as a feminist just transition. And so we'll be hearing more from each of the panelists about this as well. And so today, or within this panel discussion, we have two main questions that we'll be asking of everybody. First is, what does a feminist just transition mean to you? And for the second round of questions, so for Japan, in regards to achieving a feminist just transition, what can be done by Japan or here in Japan? What are your expectations or suggestions there? So first of all, we have Russia, who is here from Penguin or FOE Palestine. Penguin or FOE Palestine, for you as an organization or for yourself, what is a feminist just transition? Of course, as you know, the situation now in Palestine is something that we cannot even express with words, how incredibly terrible what is happening is now. But Penguin has for many years, since even 10 years ago, been working towards a community-based energy transition, particularly with women in the lead in these initiatives, these activities. So, of course, looking at the situation in Gaza today and the work of Penguin, please share that with the audience. Thank you, Russia.
Okay, it's working now. Hi all, it's good to see all of your faces here. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about what Penguin has been working for the past years in Palestine, West Bank and Gaza. And when we're talking about clean energy, we're talking about solar energy in Palestine. Mainly, this is what kind of energy projects we have. And for a lot of communities that lack the availability of electricity because it is prohibited by the Israeli occupation, the clean energy, meaning solar energy projects, are the main source of energy that brings light to those people. So there's those communities in Gaza mainly, and a lot of them in the West Bank, like the Jordan Valley, which get the electricity through the solar energy projects being installed by our member groups and other institutions as well. When we studied these projects, we found out that these projects help mainly the women because and also help them on the economic level, because they have very hard conditions working on, for example, I'll give you an example on one of the ladies that was helped with an energy project. She works on producing dairy products, and she used to do the shaking in the shaker manually, and this took hours of her. And then this lady had blind kids, so she had a lot of work to do and to take care of the kids and to be able to do all of this work to provide financial assistance to her family. When the solar energy project was installed and then she had solar panels and she had electricity at home, she saved time and energy for her family. And this increased her income and helped her kids as well. So when we're talking about this, looking at it from a political or an institutional point of view, you need these women to be included in the planning. You need women with the vision of women to be included in the planning and design because they are the most in need. So what Penguin did was to try to advocate and lobby towards having women in the planning phase of any project that is proposed or that is in the designing phase. We also studied the issue from environmental point of views and gave the recommendations of that there needs to be interference of the Environmental Quality Authority and the environmental legislation into control over these projects so they don't have future bad effects on the land. During our studies, we found that there's no agricultural lands used in the solar energy, especially the large projects. And we found that on the economical level, it helped zero out a lot of bills for a lot of Palestinians. So in this case, they reduce the dependence on the Israeli companies that sells electricity to the Palestinians and increases their independence. So even on the political level, this helps the Palestinian be more independent and not to be in need of the Israeli electricity. So working on that as well, we had to empower women also to be able on the technical level to install, do the operation and maintenance for a lot of the solar panels. So we were successful in training 30 women completely to install the solar panels, to operate them, to maintain them in the future. So including these women in the work of planning and operation and maintaining makes it for them easier because they are the ones who basically are to benefit from these projects. Other than that, when we studied the biodiversity, we found out that of course the projects are not being like done in agricultural lands, but at the same time, some of the people who own those solar panels, we found out that they kill birds so that they don't, put their waste on the solar panels and then the efficiency goes down. We advocated towards like new legislations that prohibits this. There's a lot more information, but I was asked to wrap up.
Thank you very much, Rasha-san. Yes, we have limited amount of time, so we would like to move on. But Hemantha-san, if Sri Lanka, Hemantha-san is here, I would like to ask about if we international, because you are an international, for international chairman as well. But when it comes to just transition and system change or connection between the two, and Sri Lanka and Asia overall initiatives towards the just transition, would you like to talk about this initiative?
Thank you very much, Hane. Thanks to the Friends of the Earth, Japan, and the university here. It's an honor to be here and speak to you another time. Of course, Sri Lanka and Japan has long relationship. In Sri Lanka, we also suffer from climate crisis. All across the world, this is happening. But the poor people in my country suffer the most. But their contribution, as we all know, is very, very little to the climate change. The solutions they're bringing, they're going to bring nuclear reactors from Russia and 3 nuclear reactors from Russia, wind power proposed by big Indian corporation called Adani, and they're going to destroy the whole bird migration route. Sri Lanka is the last habitat in the Asian flyway, which brings about 15 million birds annually to Sri Lanka. About 1 million birds stays in the wet areas and they move into the other areas. But these windmills are going to destroy their habitat completely. So we are fighting. We are fighting against renewable energy. We are fighting against wind power. We are fighting against solar power. These are the solutions given by the rich nations as the solution to reduce climate change. But of course, we agree that they are renewables. They are not necessarily very, very green projects. They bring a lot of disasters, not only to the humans, but to the birds. Birds has nothing to do with this climate change. They did not make any emission, so therefore they are not responsible. So the just transition we are talking in resolving climate change, we are talking again about humans. We are talking about the labor sector. We are talking about how we can have their livelihood continue even in the climate change era. But of course, we know our problem is much bigger. Although we are explaining everything under the climate change focus, climate change lens, climate change is not the only problem we are suffering at the moment. It's the whole consumption pattern we are having responsible for this one. It's the whole governance mechanism is responsible for this destruction. So they have created multiple crises. They have created environmental crisis, they have created social injustices, they have created social inequity. So all these patriarchal situation comes with the problems created by these developed countries. We are in a patriarchal system. So without resolving this problem, I don't think we are going to have the system change, which we are talking across the federation. We are pushing for system change. And this is system change need to think about the whole systems, not only the energy systems. So that's quite important for us. We need to change how people have a connection with the environment. We need the birds to live in this world. We need the birds to sing for us, not only for us, but they are for future generations. We need the wind to run. We need the rain to come. Otherwise, our systems are not going to work. We need the winds. So therefore, I think it's very, very important for us to understand just by handling climate change or just by handling energy systems, not going to bring the transformation we are looking for. We are looking for system change. That's the transformation we did. When it comes to system change, it's about how we are dealing with the environment, how we are dealing with the production, how we are dealing with the governance, because we all know that our governance, they're making bad policies. Even the United Nations, which is the multilateral platform, were talking about these problems. They are not in a position to resolve these issues. We started talking about environmental problems in 1972 during the Stockholm Convention. So Stockholm Agreement. So then since the 1992, we have started talking about the climate change. Now, how many years we have been speaking about this language? But unfortunately, that language has not bring the solution. They were not able to reduce the emissions, which is the reason for the sea level rise, which is the reason for all these strong rains, high intensity rains. Therefore, in my understanding, we need to shape our governance policies. We need to change our global policies. At the same time, we need to shape our interaction between the nature, environment, and our living system and our planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Hemanta, for these words. This has reminded us that as much as we can just talk about the transition to renewables, we can see that when this is being led by the corporations, this has so many impacts, for example, on biodiversity that we need to remember and pay attention to as well. And also that we're not only looking for an energy transition, but complete system change, fundamental system change as well. And there is a need to change international rules in regards to this as well. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I didn't mention before, but FOE Japan also just recently launched a new article explaining what a just transition is in Japanese as well, explaining also what kind of changes are needed in the international systems instructions as well. So if you'd like to learn more, please take a look at that. So we heard from Hemanta about the renewable energy and some of the problems which it involves. But then when we're thinking about how are we going to increase renewables, what are the processes and what kind of challenges will come up as part of this process as well? So next, we will be hearing from FOA Philippines, from Mai, who will share with us about the minerals issue, about the minerals that will become part of this and the issues of critical minerals in regards to the just transition. Over to you.
Konnichiwa, good afternoon. Thank you for having us here. As you know, the Philippines is endowed with significant natural resources. We are sometimes first, we are sometimes second in terms of nickel production. So it isn't a surprise that Sumitomo, a very huge mining corporation, also has interest in some of the largest nickel production in the Philippines. But we are a site of extraction. What does that mean? Upstream industries is where we're at, but we're not a manufacturing corporation. So a lot of these minerals get exported elsewhere, here in Japan, manufactured, goes everywhere else. The supply chain is global. And it remains very ironic, paradoxical, that the communities, primarily indigenous peoples, who are very often ousted from their lands, harassed out of their lands, from which nickel are mined from, do not even have access to energy. And so the issue that comes with this heightening, increasing demand for what we call critical minerals, energy transition minerals, or transition minerals, is a lot of violence on the ground. Human rights violations that happen often go underreported, couched under the need to transition as fast, but very often exactly forgetting about the qualifications of it being a just transition. For whom is this transition primarily for? Is it to maintain the lifestyles of northern countries that have facilities already? Whereas you have the disparity in communities that do not have access to energy, as I've said, and with that, no access to education, no access to basic health, etc., etc. So these are some of the issues. We often forget as well, because when we talk of energy, we see the effects, but we forget that these are founded on tangible, finite materials. The infrastructure by which renewable energy is built on finite, non-renewable materials. And so we're hastening, we want to move fast to transitioning to renewable energies, but we're doing that in a very fast pace, also using finite resources quite fast. And so if we are not careful, we may be perpetuating systems of exploitation, say from mineral resources, into your renewable systems. So it really is, it calls upon us, this hard interrogation into our systems of how do we use our natural resources, not just in the context of energy, but overall, in the context not only of profit, but also of consumption. Because ecology has its limits. And perhaps we are at this point of the Anthropocene, both highlighting the marvelous wonders of man, but also the marvelous greed of man for our comforts. No? We've come to this era that we are made to face, made to feel the discomforts of our planet, the heat of today, very literally. No? So I think that when Hemanta was talking about system change, these are some of the things, no, the hard considerations that we need to consider when we're talking about just transition. Otherwise, we're just perhaps postponing, giving ourselves a bit of time. But what about the next generation? And so on that cautionary note is a story I bring with you from my island. Thank you.
Raisa, thank you very much for your comment. You mentioned about the critical minerals and indigenous people's lives, and I could understand the degree of impact to both of them very well. Next, I would like to ask if we individual, would you like to give a comment, because Vijayan-san used to be involved in the civil movement for a very long time in India, and within that movement, in the very long history of civil movement in India, if you could talk about how you perceive the just transition in the context. So go ahead.
Thank you. I hope I'm audible. Thanks to the interpreters for the wonderful job that you guys are doing, without which connecting with all of you would have been impossible. Thanks to FOI Japan, of course, and the university for the opportunity. I just thought I'll actually start with a quick step back into what Hanoi started with, which is just transition as a framework, where it comes from, who it was relevant to, and you know, because when in theory, when you just purely look at a definition of just transition, it actually is, it's a concept developed by the trade union movement, as Hanoi mentioned, to encompass social interventions needed to secure workers' rights and livelihoods, especially when economies are shifting to sustainable production, primarily combating, one, climate change, and two, protecting biodiversity. This is the pure technical definition of this transition in that sense. So from a high carbon economy to a low carbon economy. No, so Tony Masochi, or Anthony Masochi, who was the leader of the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers Union in the 1980s in the US, he's the one who said, we need a super fund for workers. We need a super fund for workers who were pushed into this transition of production. So from the trade union movement to the ecological movement and the feminist movement, when this entire terminology went through several dialogues and debates and frustrating conversations of many nights, even in organizations like the Friends of the Earth. Where are we now? I think it's very important for us to realize that the very same agencies that promoted the high carbon economic model of capitalism, colonialism, exploitation, expansion, and extraction, they have adopted to the new language of sustainability, climate justice, renewables, etc., etc. And I think this is where the danger is, and this is my primary point. So the World Bank, ADB, the IMF, the International Finance Corporation, all of them start talking this language of sustainability, climate justice, renewables, blah, blah, blah. So it has gone away from the trade union movement, it has gone away from the ecological movement, it has gone away from the feminist movement. Now coming to India, where I come from, where just transition has actually become a bit of a mockery, because we are definitely also talking about solar, wind, hydro, nuclear, biomass. All of this is within, it's the same all over the world, right? But the problem is the very same corporations and companies that were faulted for time immemorial for having displaced hundreds and thousands and millions of people across the subcontinent of South Asia are the same people contracted to take away the new renewables projects. So the mega nature of projects, the large nature of projects is not changing. So they are still intended at land grabbing, environmental damage, taking away livelihoods, and displacement. So Adani is a classic case. Now Adani is going into Sri Lanka to do wind power mills, and all over Sri Lankan newspapers, they are doing that. So corporate-driven, mega framework, land grabbing, all of those. Now, e-vehicles in India is a classic example of this hypocrisy that we live. The electric cars, because of the simple fact that we actually burn fossil fuels to produce that electricity and then run them in our cities saying that tail end pollution is much less. This is a classic case of a false solution, because it is not that energy is produced by solar or any decentralized form of energy production. Instead, it is completely driven by the same fossil fuel driven market. So as FOEI, we are concerned and worried that this is a greenwashing dictated by corporate neocolonialism, which is in senses a new age crony capitalism, backed by, and this region, it's very important to know this, authoritarian, regressive, conservative governments. It comes very easy for them to drive these projects because of the simple fact that they are far more authoritarian. They control powers, even inside democracies. So if we want collectively that, so it's blood money, carbon trading is a classic example. If we collectively want that just transition remains just transition and not just another transition, then we have to make sure, bring on board people and communities. Many of our co-speakers already spoke about it, how we have to bring people and communities. And he mentioned the word just transformation. The feminist framework is fundamental to that. Community wisdom and traditional knowledge of impacted people is fundamental to that. Reparations as a framework, historical reparations to communities and indigenous people as a framework is fundamental to that, and not loss and damages language. Reparations are historically important and not loss and damage framework. Regulate consumption, then come up with false solutions. End the market games by corporations to make more profits under the cover of sustainability. That is very essential. Low carbon, sustainability and low carbon has become their coinage now. Decentralized and community-based power future, like what our Palestinian friend just described, Rasha spoke about, decentralized, community-based, and empowering communities kind of power future. So that has to become this thing. So in one line to conclude, what does feminist just transition to me? It is also a question of, this was not anthropocentrism. This was capitocentrism that we had been seeing. And so anthropocentrism would mean human-centered, capitalist development framework, while the blame is on anthropocentrism, but no, the blame was not by humans. It was capitocentrism that has resulted in where we are, and I think that's where a just transformation is what we need. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for these words, Vijayan. And if I was to summarize three of the main points that you shared, we can see these buzzwords about renewable sustainability and so on being taken on and used as greenwashing by corporations, which have been in charge, for example. And so whether it's biomass or these other alternatives that we heard about in session 2, LNG or even nuclear power, these kind of questions, these kind of challenges are the same in all countries. And this is why we need to work together across borders to cooperate in this kind of way. When we're talking about a just transition, this is not just about the transition of energy itself, also all about decentralizing. It's also about making it community-based. And I think we could hear that very well from Vijayan's presentation. Next, we'll be hearing from Chloe of FOE Australia. And this is a different voice from, Australia is perhaps not part of the global south, so in a different position. But when we're talking about what's needed for a just transition, and looking at the need for decentralization, for example, as was emphasized here. Within Australia, there are also efforts for community-based transition, community-based initiatives as well. So Chloe, I hope you can share some of those with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hannah-san. And yes, I want to start by talking about what the just transition means locally for communities in Australia. And I will talk a little bit about the position of Australia in the global just transition later. But I wanted to share with you the story of some of our coal mining and coal-fired power affected communities in Australia and I guess where they are in the just transition and exactly what has got them to this point. So I'm from Victoria, which is in the south of Australia. And in Australia, nearly all of our power comes from coal-fired power and has historically. And particularly in the south, the quality of our coal is quite low. And so it has a lot more health implications that come from it, even than the burning of other kinds of coal in Australia. And the coal mining and coal-fired power stations are kind of centralised in one community called the Latrobe Valley. So for decades, since colonisation really, the Latrobe Valley has been the centre of coal mining and coal production, which provided a lot of working and lower middle class jobs for the community in that area. And the coal mining and the coal-fired power stations were state-owned. In that context, there were lots of jobs for people in coal mining and coal-fired power stations, but they already came at a huge cost to the community, mainly in the health impacts that came with the mining and burning of coal. Then in the 1990s, we actually went through a huge privatisation of our coal mining and burning industry in Victoria. Multinational companies came and purchased all of our coal-fired infrastructure, and that resulted in really the devastation of those communities. These big multinational companies came in, they decided to halve or even take the workforce to a third of what existed before. They increased the wages of people working in the coal-fired power plants, but they really decimated the number of jobs and employment in that area, which meant that a lot of bad social consequences resulted. There was a big increase in poverty in those areas, huge increases in domestic violence, huge increases in crime in those areas. And nothing was done at that time to create more jobs, nor to deal with the, I guess, gender disparity that existed, because coal-fired power workers have always predominantly been men. And throughout the decades, I guess the gender division of labour was greater, but even as women started entering the workforce more and more, jobs for women were not created in that community. So it created a complete social and economic devastation of those communities, the privatisation in the 1990s, and that has only continued and worsened over time. So since then, in the last 10 years or so, we have had a Labor government come in. The Labor Party in Australia are definitely aligned with the trade union movement. We would probably call them a centrist, or maybe even centre-right party in our political analysis, but they're considered the left-leaning party in, I guess, the more mainstream analysis. And though the Labor Party, especially at the state level, have decided to take climate action seriously to some extent, and they have decided that we want to go through a rapid transition away from coal-fired power towards renewable energy. And they've set very high renewable energy targets, and they want to make this transition happen quickly. And they've also set up what they call an authority that is supposed to be set up to manage a just transition in those communities in particular. However, I would say their definition of just transition is very much the trade union movement definition that Vijayan was talking about before. So it's a definition that really sees the just transition just about moving workers who were working in coal-fired power and polluting industries into the renewable energy sector and making sure that they have as seamless transition to that new energy sector as possible. They want to make sure they maintain the high wages that they had kept in the coal industry, and they want to basically reskill those workers to then move into the renewable energy sector. But the critique that we have with that is that that no way redresses the historical injustice for that community. First Nations people or Aboriginal Australians have not been part of the coal-fired power workforce in big numbers previously. Women have not been part of that industry. There are many, many people in the community who were never allowed to participate as workers previously and are not being considered in what the government sees as a just transition moving forward. So at Friends of the Earth Australia, I guess what we are asking for is that just transition is considered in a holistic way, considering all of the community, considering our historical need to redress the harms of colonisation by making sure that First Nations people and Aboriginal Australians are central in how the just transition is defined, to make sure that women and jobs for women are central, and the creation of jobs for women are central in the new economy that's created, and to make sure that a more just economic and social system is created out of the wake of a very patriarchal energy system that existed previously.
はい、黒井さん、ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much, Chloe. I think I said Global South when I tried to introduce Chloe-san, but sorry, it was Global North instead. Thank you very much for your comment. You mentioned about coal mining, and the industry is quite similar to what's happening in Japan. So I think it was a good information for us all. We need to see the shift at the governmental level to accelerate the change. And it seems like you're kind of running out of time. So lastly, I would like to ask all of you a question. I would like to ask one same question to all of you. Regarding the system change or towards the system change, what can Japan do as a member of Asian country? What do you expect to Japan? Could you start from Italy, Palestine, Masha-san? And one comment, 1 minute per person, please.
Yeah, since it's only 1 minute, I'd like to just say that in Gaza, 60% of the energy was mainly dependent on solar energy. 98% of those solar energy panels are completely destroyed now. So there's zero electricity in Gaza now. What I would like of Japan and all of the other countries to stand by Palestine in this very, very critical stage. We as Penguin are studying all of this solar energy projects, what kind of projects, what kind of institutions, hospitals, schools, buildings that were completely dependent on this. We're having the study being finalized these few days. We're also planning a study about a reconstruction, a complete reconstruction plan of all of those solar energy projects. We'd like at this stage to ask everyone for the support in the coming phase. Thank you.
In my 1 minute, I won't say that Japan still need to cut their emissions. So they have not done their part. It's their responsibility to cut their emissions immediately. The second is actually Japanese companies still continue to promote fossil fuel and also some dirty fossil projects across the world. So they are continue to do in mining across the world, and unless you change yourself, you cannot bring the just transition to this country. I mean, So unless the consumption level change, so we are not going to bring this one. So I think that Japan can get this leadership, and it has a power. It has a power at the multilateral spaces. So definitely at the Asian Development Bank, in the United Nations, and even through the JICA and JBIC. So they have a lot of bilateral connections in many of the countries. So you need to change your policies and bring good policies, and then implement them to bring just transition. It's not just transition, but it's a transformation of the world. So you have done that part. You have shown that before, but now you need to reverse some of these policies. Thank you.
1 minute is rather challenging for such a powerful nation, but let me be very specific. So Japan, along with the United States, earlier I spoke about the Anthropocene. Perhaps I should qualify that with the Capitalocene, no? That is our age now. And speaking of capital, I was going to speak about the Asian Development Bank, because that is where Japan, along with the United States, holds the largest stake. This is not a charitable institution. It's a bank. And the Philippines is the second largest borrower, I think, from the ADB. And so a lot of the frameworks in that borrowing is very influential into how other states are able to frame their just energy transition or whatever transition framework. But it is informed, it is conditioned by the loans that we get from the ADB. So it becomes top down then. So it is your taxpayers' money. So it's very important that you watch out. For example, one of that is the environmental and social framework. How is the ADB imposing that in other nation states, especially in nation states where the power disparity and the supply chain disparity, as I mentioned earlier, what is the obligation, reparation, etc. conditions that go into this loan agreements? So that would be one. Thank you.
Hi, as a South Asian and as an Indian, plus someone who has done history all through my life, as soon as someone says that it's 1 minute and all, my tendency is to run away with the mic so that you can't catch me and take back. All right. Amidst authoritarian, dictatorial, rising conservative, corporate-controlled regimes of Asia Pacific, including China and India, Japan holds some sort of, and I'm talking about the Japanese government here, Japan holds some sort of a moral high ground to take lead as a country and regional leader in leading the demand and implementation of a just transformation. How is it that Japan is okay with nuke energy as a green energy? I mean, look at its own past. How is it that a nuke energy is green energy for the people of Japan? How can Japan try to balance between Israel and Palestine? Where is this coming from? I mean, and about the people, I think we have to have very serious campaigns in our communities amidst our people to reduce consumption. And especially energy-based consumption patterns that completely leave aside human energy component and only focus on power, electricity as the energy of the future. There has to be serious rethinking. To the people of Japan, support global civil society, but especially in Global South, especially in other countries of Asia Pacific, to build new alternatives to capitalism. I don't think anything else will work as much as building alternatives to capitalism. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think what Japan needs to do is very similar, very connected to what Australia needs to do. So at the moment, Australia is the biggest exporter of coal in the world. And now that we are rapidly moving to the transition to renewable energy in Australia, even the environment groups are now calling for Australia to become a net exporter of renewable energy, and a renewable energy superpower is what they're calling for. And I think in calling for that, it really shows how this transition in the global north is really just to a form of new green capitalism, which continues to be as extractive as the old models of capitalism. And Mai was talking about the impacts of these new rare earth minerals on communities in the global south. And the transition in the global north threatens to continue the same kind of extractive destruction of the global south that it did previously. And in the global north, we are not looking at reducing consumption. We're not looking at bringing our energy needs in line with the rest of the world so we don't continue to extract from communities in the global south in the same way. And our renewable energy exports are supposed to go to Singapore, Japan, South Korea, the other global north countries in the region, to support them to continue the levels of consumption that they have at the moment or increase them. So I think as global north countries and as environment groups in the global north in Asia, we need to be working together to be not only reducing emissions, but also seriously looking at our energy consumption and how it can be reduced to make sure that we are working in solidarity with our with communities in the global south.
Thank you very much. And really, thanks to your wonderful cooperation, we've actually managed to be a little bit ahead of time even. So we'd like to open up, and if there's anyone in the audience who has any questions, we'll have one question from, or maybe two, from the audience. So if anybody has any questions for any of the panelists here today, please feel free to raise your hand. We have someone at the very back. If there's anyone else, please feel free to raise your hands. We'll take the first question then. So I am from Hosei University. My name is Matsumoto. Thank you so much to everybody today. When we're looking at greenwashing, I'd like to ask a question about this. So today, you're here at the Ichigaya campus of Hosei University for this symposium, and Diana Kaur from the university spoke at the beginning that the university has made a carbon neutral declaration. So for someone who's been active in NGOs, I see this actually as greenwashing. Within this university, there is, of course, the energy, we have machines to measure the consumption, and this is made visible to the students, and it's looking at raising their awareness of these issues through that, for making it visible. And there are 30,000 students at this campus. So every year there's 7,000 new students that come in and then leave. And when we look at the CO2 emissions, we do have every year a goal to reduce this. But looking at what kind, we haven't included about what source this energy is coming from. So a carbon neutral policy, if we are, well, this is very closely linked to the Japanese government's policy. So my question is, these kind of, we're having core students about 20 years old at this university. If I tell them this is greenwashing, this is just going along with what the government is saying, this is an action which just goes along with this, and it's just something very trivial rather than something actually contributing. And it actually even puts us in the opposite direction of a real just transition. I tell them that you could look at it in this approach. This question is for anyone. Hanaya-san, please feel free to choose who you'd like to answer, or anybody can raise your hand. But now that we're here at the university, I'd like to ask your thoughts about this kind of carbon neutral declaration of a university such as this. Do you think it's greenwashing? Anybody feel free to answer. Thank you for the question. It's a very ironic question in a way, a little bit. So is there any panelist who'd like to answer this question? Vijaya, maybe? So Vijayan, over to you.
Thank you for that. And I'm happy to see the democracy inside the campus, that we are still able to do this, because in Indian campuses now we are not able to do it. So good that it's still vibrant in terms of democratic values. This whole decarbonizing mission has been from the very beginning corporate centric. So let us not forget the fact that at every stage of it, corporations and profit mongers are involved in scheming, planning, engineering for it, and architecting for it. So at every scale, in my experience, this whole decarbonizing project, till it becomes human-centric and people-centric, and and that's why I said one thing is for the government to make claims about these things and corporations to hijack these agendas, but another for a well-educated society to understand that these are being hijacked. These whole concepts are being hijacked for profit making. So I think that's where I would fundamentally draw the line between what is a genuine, low consumption pattern, even for a university to develop, vis-a-vis what is actually a high level of greenwashing, as you called it. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. ありがとう。もしよかったらラッシャー
Thank you very much. I wonder if either Rasha or Mai would like to share a comment.
comment on this topic.
It's hard to bite the hand that just fed you snacks and, in this air-conditioned room. That's a very difficult question because it is an effort. It is an effort. But I guess it's also, I do agree with Rich to some point, no? We're now scrambling in a heating planet to call ourselves green. But again, it maintains a certain level of consumption and a certain level of convenience. My teammates in LRC don't like me talking about these things because I tend to be dystopian, because I think we've really hit that point, of overcapitalization, of overconsumption, and our minds have normalized our convenience as well. So it's so difficult to deconstruct. Education is now tied to our laptops. Are we going to tell our students, don't use your laptops because that's energy consuming, so on and so forth? So it's a very difficult tightrope. No? I'm also not saying let's petrify ourselves and begin to use candles, and walk. But certainly Japan, I'm not giving you concrete answers right now, but certainly we are in a place, Japan, where it's your culture is a ripe material for this reflection. Your Shinto shrines, your respect for nature, and yet at the same time, your metallic infrastructures, the extreme and the balance. Maybe that's what's demanded of us. This seeking of how is it to be human on this planet, but at the same time, not simply becoming just about the self, but also the structures that have pulled us into the matrix without losing hope. I know I'm talking in abstraction because there's no easy answer. It's no easy answer. But certainly, I don't know. How do we speak to power? How do we reclaim that power? Literally, power, energy, and power in our politics as well. Perhaps these are things that we need to ruminate, because I think we've really crossed that tipping point.
ありがとうございます。はい。では、時間になりました。
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. The third part is going to be closed now, but Rasha-san, do you have any comment from you or any answer to the question that's been previously asked, if you have anything to mention?
I totally agree with what Mai said, actually. Of course, with you, Vivian, but the way Mai explained it, the balance, to try to balance things around, and that there is no right or wrong answer, like to try at least to balance things and to be in the right way. At least we can, like, We're not here to judge, but we're here to support.
Thank you very much. Would you like to?
No, I just want to say now, we are inside the box. I know unless we looking from outside, this is not easy to resolve. I mean, this is only one issue or one thing we are talking, but the billions of such issues we are trying to deal with. So, it's that our generation, or maybe the just past generation is responsible creating all these. In every time when I go to schools, universities, they say, start educating children and they will bring the solution. I say, this is a problem we have created. Unless we resolve this issue, we cannot give this world to the next generation. So I think everybody should keep that in mind. So this is a problem we have created. So we have to do something. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're now right on time. So we'd like to close the third session, and I'll pass over to Akiko once again, the overall moderator. Thanks once again, everyone. Thank you so much for a really meaningful discussion that we just heard now from that panel. So today, we also have many members who did not present today. We have 19 members from FOE International and also Asia Pacific who are here today. So once again, thank you to all of you as well. And at the very end, we have a few announcements that we would like to share. The first is in regards to Palestine. We would like to invite you to share donations. We've heard from Russia about the serious situation in Gaza now, and the efforts that FOE Palestine, Pengon, is working on to support communities where the solar panels have been completely destroyed. So FOE Japan, on our homepage, we also have information, and also we are calling for donations for FOE Palestine. And for those of you here in the venue today, we also have a donation box at the exit of the room. So please feel free, if you are able to share your support for that as well. Otherwise, this is also possible via the FOE Japan website through bank transfer and so on as well. So we invite you to share your solidarity and support for our friends in Palestine at this time. And another announcement is here in Asia and Japan, we see how serious the climate crisis is, and the Japanese energy policy is really going in the wrong direction at the moment, which is very concerning for all of us. So at the moment, actually, there is the Japanese basic energy plan is being reconsidered this year, and there will be a revision conducted this year. Unfortunately, the Japanese government and industry is pursuing its support for nuclear power and fossil fuels, including even coal. Within this, on the screen now, we can see there is, together with the Ministry of Energy, has actually a box for opinions from citizens, or for any people in Japan to submit as many times as they want their opinions in regards to this basic energy plan. And so even if it's just one line, we'd like to invite you to share your thoughts about Japan's energy policy. Once you've gone home today after the symposium or tomorrow, please have a think about your thoughts after today's talk as well. And we hope that you can share your voice directly to the Japanese government as well. This is part of a Japanese broad campaign between different NGOs called Watashi no Mirai, or My Future. So this is a joint action by many Japanese NGOs and citizens groups, and we have a form there that you can also fill in directly from there as well. So please do share your thoughts there as well. There is also a petition that we have in regards to this about having a real just transition. And so this is also going to be connected, so you can sign up for information about different activities that you can participate in as well. So please feel free to sign that. And the last announcement, if you would like to continue to support or work together with FOE in Japan, we are also anytime seeking supporters or members. And so we'd invite any of you who are not yet to think about joining FOE Japan as well. So thank you once again for a very long day today, but for joining us all for very meaningful discussions this afternoon. We also have a questionnaire that has been shared with any participants. So if you have any messages or comments for the members from FOE Asia Pacific who are here, any thoughts about today's symposium and so on, please feel free to share them in the questionnaire. Once again, thank you everybody and take care on your way home. And please be sure to return your interpreting radios, the receivers, on your way out as well.